Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for taking the time to attend our consumer workshop again this year. To those joining us for the first time, I say welcome. My name is Rilebogile Mashego. I am an assistant ombudsman at the Office of the Ombudsman for Short-Term Insurance. I will be facilitating this morning's workshop. This year, we are excited to be hosting a joint workshop with other Ombud schemes. So, during today's workshop, you will be hearing from Vuyolwethu Skolo and Sonia Diacher from the Long-Term Insurance Ombuds Office, Tobile Masina from the Ombud for Financial Services Providers, Omar Ramahu from the Consumer Goods and Services Ombud, Kwanda Vabaza from the Office of the Banking Ombud, Ipeleng Mtwa and Polani Gila from the Office of the Joburg Ombud, Kabelo Teme from the Office of the Credit Ombud, Lucius Budibe from the Office of the Motor Industry Ombud. Finally, you will be hearing from the Office of the Ombudsman for Short-Term Insurance. I, together with Assistant Ombudsman Regina Chindomu, will be presenting to you. Despite conducting this workshop under a visual platform, we want this to be an interactive session. If you look on the left-hand side of your screen, you will see our Q&A chat box. Please type in your questions and comments during any of the presentations, as we will have a panel discussion at the end of the presentations in order to address your questions. Also, while we may be speaking on specific topics during the workshop, you are welcome to post any other questions you may have concerning the respective offices. Our panel speakers will deal with as much as we can during the time allocated for this workshop. This will be an informative session, and so without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our first speaker, Vuyolwethu Skolo.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vuyo Skolo. I'm an assistant ombudsman from the Office of the Long-Term Insurance Ombudsman for the Long-Term Insurance. My presentation today is about non-payment of premiums. But first, I will first give a brief background about our office. Thank you. I will first go to our mission. What is our mission? Our mission is to receive and consider complaints against subscribing members of the long-term insurance industry and to resolve such complaints through mediation, conciliation, recommendation, or determination. In order to achieve our mission, we follow an informal process, which is easily accessible, unlike the courts of law. Our process is cost-effective. It ensures speedy resolution of disputes. We are a voluntary financial ombudsman scheme, which is recognized by statute. We are a non-profit association. Our service is free to complainants. We resolve complaints against life insurance companies arising from the marketing, conclusion, interpretation, administration, or termination of long-term insurance policies. What are the long-term insurance policies? It is your life policies, funeral policies, credit life policies, disability policies, health and investment policies. What can consumers complain about to our office? Any problems with life or long-term insurance, and this includes your declined claims, poor service that you receive from the insurers, lapsing of policies, non-disclosure, benefit values, and investments. Now to the topic of today about the non-payment of premiums. What are some aspects of premiums? We need to know that the duty to ensure that premiums are paid rests on the policyholder. The policyholder is usually the premium payer, but not always. Even if payments are made by way of a debit order or stop order, the premium payer must still check that the premium payment was successful. We've got a grace period. In life policies, premiums are payable in advance. The policyholder protection rules prescribe that if premiums are not paid on due date, there should be a grace period of at least 15 days before a policy lapses. Insurers may grant a longer period, often it's 30 days. It depends on each insurer's terms and conditions of that particular policy. We've got risk-only benefits. In policies which only have risk benefits, the grace period is usually the only leeway the premium payer has. If the premium is not paid during that period, the cover will cease. We've got double debits. Some insurers, they usually make use of double debits. Where a debit order has failed, if a debit order fails in 1 month, the insurer will then do a double debit the following month to recover both the unpaid premium and the current month's premiums. Remember, insurers are not obliged to follow this practice, and the practice may differ from one insurer to another insurer. Notification of non-payment of premiums. The policyholder protection rules require an insurer to notify the premium payer when a premium has not been received, meaning that if they did not receive their premium, they need to notify the policyholder that the premium has not been received. The hints that we will give to premium payers or policyholders: check your bank statement for debit orders, or if your policy deducts via a stop order, always check your salary slip every month to make sure that your insurance premium was paid. Remember, it has to be paid in advance. Also note that if you change your bank, if you are paying your premiums via a debit order, or you change employer, if you have been paying by stop order, remember to make new arrangement for payment of your premium. If you have missed a premium, contact your insurer immediately or your financial advisor to make arrangements regarding your policy. Thank you. I will now hand over to Sonia Diage, my colleague from the Ombudsman for Long-Term Insurance. Thank you.
Thank you, Vuyo. I will just share my slides quickly. My slides clear? Good morning, everybody. I am Sonia Marie from the Ombudsman of the Office of the Ombudsman for Long-Term Insurance. I'm also one of the assistant ombudsman. or adjudicator, and I will be talking to you about disability claims. I will highlight the common terms and conditions found in policy contracts, which is often the reasons why insurers repudiate claims, and provide you with the Ombudsman view on some of the issues. The policy terms and conditions that I will discuss relate to two types of disability benefits. The income disability benefit, which is a monthly benefit to replace your income or your salary when you are unable to earn an income, and the permanent disability benefit, which is a lump sum benefit. I have included some statistics on the topic. The table represents the number of complaints that we were able to resolve wholly or partially in favor of complainants. The statistics are of claims declined as a result of policy terms and conditions that were not recognized or met. If you are interested in more statistical information, you're welcome to consult our annual reports on our website. As soon as an insured becomes aware that his injury or illness may continue for an extended period of time, they should notify the insurer of a potential claim. Common notification periods are 3 or 6 months for income replacement benefits, or 6 or 12 months for other claims. The insured should take note of his date of disability as well as the submission date, as these two dates often run concurrently. This will ensure that the claim is submitted timeously and that the insurer does not decline the claim for reasons of late submission. In instances such as these, we look at the reasons for the late submission, as it's often not the insured's fault, and we will ask the insurer to assess the claim regardless. The waiting period starts immediately after an insured stopped working. It's a period during which the insurer assesses the claim and that the insured receives treatment. It's important for the insured to know how long the waiting period is. For example, if an insured has 30 days sick leave and the waiting period is 6 months, they will be without an income for 5 months. The date of disability is the date the insured could last perform the duties of his occupation. At times, an insured would be accommodated in another position, for example, by his employer, and if it transpires that he also struggles with a new job, a disability claim will be submitted. But at claim stage, the question may arise: when did the insured become disabled? Was it while he was doing his first job, or was it while he was doing his second job or the new job? This sometimes becomes the point of dispute. It's also important to inform the insurer when your occupation changes. The policy contract has certain exclusions that the insured should be aware of. If they become disabled within the first year as a result of an illness that is pre-existing, the condition will be excluded. Also, any illness or injury sustained through negligence or willful exposure to danger and intentional self-inflicted injury are excluded. So if you take part in extreme sports, for example, it's best to declare it to the insurer or to ask the insurer if injuries as a result of your participation in such activities are excluded. Then lastly, if an insured refuses to undergo suitable treatment, the insurer may refuse to approve the payment of the disability benefit. Our stance is that an insured cannot be forced to undergo serious surgery, but routine operations like cataract surgery or carpal tunnel release surgery is acceptable. Insurers have different definitions of disability. This definition is consulted when the insurer assesses whether a disability claim is valid. I deconstructed a definition of disability to highlight the different elements considered during the assessment process. First, the insured must be totally and continuously and sometimes permanently incapable of performing their own or what we call their regular occupation. In the case of income benefits, the definition usually changes after 12 or 24 months, and the insured will then be assessed for his ability to perform a suited or any occupation. Some policy contracts would require the employer to consider reasonable accommodation or alternative occupations upfront and in line with the Labour Relations Act. The insured may not know this and expect to stop working altogether and to receive disability benefits. Also, when an insured is incapable of working, criteria is not limited to the job they did at their regular occupation, but the broader open labour market and even self-employment. Lastly, when alternatives are considered, the insurer looks at the insured's knowledge, training, education and experience. And for younger person, reskilling into another occupation is also considered. It's important that the insured knows which salary the disability benefit is based on. This is the same salary that the monthly premium that they pay is calculated from, so it can be seen on the salary slip. It could be total cost to company, pensionable salary, or what is termed the risk salary. In most cases, commission and bonuses do not form part of the risk salary. So if the insured receives a basic salary, but the bulk of his income comes from commission, his disability benefit could be very small if it's only based on the basic salary. Also, the salary that is used is the salary immediately before the waiting period. So if the insured is, for example, injured, undergoes surgery 3 months later and receives rehabilitation over a period of 6 months, the benefit will be calculated using the salary when the insured last worked. Lastly, it's important to know what the disability benefit percentage is that the insured will be receiving, because it's not going to be the full salary. Most commonly, benefits are 75% of salary. An insured is often under the impression that they will receive disability benefits and that there is no end date to this. Benefits cease when retirement benefits are due, when an insured is no longer disabled in terms of the definition of disability, and at benefit cessation date. The policy would specify the date. For example, a retirement age on the policy could be 60, 62, or 65 years. Benefits also cease when the insured dies. Regarding prescription, an insured should know that a claim could prescribe. So it's important to submit a claim or to make inquiries as soon as possible if they don't agree with the insurer's decision or if they have something that they wish to query. Finally, I'd like to leave you with some hints. Read your policy. Ask for a copy if you don't have one. Know the terms and conditions of your policy. Ask that it be explained to you. Educate your co-workers and family if you are more knowledgeable. And if you have any queries or questions regarding your disability claim or your benefits or even the policy contract, contact the insurance company. If you would like to lodge a complaint, our details is on the screen. Thank you. I'd now like to hand over to Oma Ramaru. Oma is from the Consumer Goods and Services Ombud. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to share a presentation. Let me wait for my colleague to stop sharing. Okay, perfect. Let me share my presentation. Okay. I trust you are able to see the presentation on the screen. Are we able to see the presentation? Good morning.
Ms. Ramaru,
Yes.
we can see it partially. I think you've given us a screenshot of the the virtual meeting.
Okay.
Now it's fine. We can see it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Omar Amaru from the Consumer Goods and Services Ombud. I'd like to share who we are and what do we do. The Consumer Goods and Services Ombud, acronym CGSO, is an impartial, independent dispute resolution scheme established in 2013 in terms of Section 82, subsection 6 of the Consumer Protection Act. And our mandate is to mediate disputes and ensure that industry players abide by the Consumer Goods and Services Industry Code of Conduct. Our other mandate is to educate consumers as to their rights and redress should an industry member breach the consumer protection or the code of conduct of Consumer Goods and Services Ombud, and is to offer guidance to participants around the implementation of and compliance with the CPA. Participants, we are referring to the suppliers, businesses. That's who we call participants. And we are a not-for-profit organization. We are funded by the participation fee. We do not receive any funds from the treasury, but the industry participants are the ones who are funding the office of the Ombud. We are answerable to the National Consumer Commission, the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, and also to our board of directors. The office is run by a small team comprising of 27 permanent employees, including contractors and internships that we take over. And what is our strategy, especially during the COVID-19 times? Is supporting the industry and influencing consumer behavior to ease the burden of COVID-19 and associated lockdown measures. Our strategy is also to providing clarity on contractual issues that arose as a result of COVID-19. We have seen so much complaints against contracts with the businesses, so we had to come in as the Ombud. Our other focus is reviewing the CGSO to ensure that it remains fit for purpose by enhancing levels of relevance, accessibility, effectiveness, and efficiency, as well as maintaining our excellent relationship with key stakeholders, which includes regulators, other Ombud offices, consumer NGOs, and participants, which will be the businesses. And as I said, that the office is funded by the participation industries. So our participation levels since inception are as follows. We've started in 2013 with only 24 members. And as of today, we have registration of over 1,000 businesses being members of the Ombud scheme. Our membership of the CGSO is counted at group level. In this respect, 87 of the 1,102 participants represent 21,352 retail outlets countrywide. So that is our participation base level. The year of lockdown and uncertainty. The CPA was not intended to deal with some of the legal issues that arose as the result of the pandemic and related lockdowns. The complaints that we saw on a rise during lockdown. It's online transaction, cancellation of travel services, advanced bookings for accommodation and other events or services, gym membership and closure of facilities, returns on clothing that could not be fitted in store during hard lockdown, inflexibility loyalty programs, unsympathetic warranty condition, and price hiking, obviously, that we saw on the rise. Our year in numbers, the number of consumer complaints rose steeply, 52% increase year on year. But e-commerce accounted for the highest number of complaints for the first time since the inception of the Consumer Goods and Services Ombud Office. But our presence on social media has been tremendously effective in ensuring that consumers know who we are. But it has, however, led to a rise in the number of out of jurisdiction complaints because the public were confused as to which complaints belongs to which ombud. But however, our call center did a good job to direct or refer the consumers who were not within our jurisdiction to the relevant offices. And we have managed, in the past financial year, we have managed to save 7.7 million on cash refund to consumers as an office. So what were the nature of complaints that we receive as the CGSO? Complaints that consumers queried against were complaints relating to goods, services, and agreement. Those complaints constituted 90% of the complaints in the financial year of 2021. But what came out with a red flag is online complaints. Complaints relating to e-commerce jumped from 6% to 27% during the period of COVID or lockdown, reflecting changes in consumer behavior as more consumers switched to online shopping because the situation was pushing the public to do online shopping. Not all suppliers were geared up to that to supply, and they were not effectively responding to that to those demands. Most complaints could have been resolved by communicating clearly, timeously, and frequently with customers, but we saw businesses failing to be there for consumers. So CGSO was dealing with complaints relating to online disputes because there were lack of deliveries. We'll see on the next slide. So this graph is showing us that from 2020, we received over 1,800 complaints relating to online. 2021, 2,198. Now in 2022, we're sitting on 579 because of the education that we are giving the businesses to be there for their consumers who have ordered. But when we then zoom in to what type of complaints relating to this online transaction, it's normally not on time. The delivery is not reaching as per promised. It's not reaching the destination or the consumer as per promise. Or if the delivery is happening, it's not as per order. It's not what the consumer has ordered. And also it's not as per what was advertised. We picked up that businesses were misleading or over advertising, bait marketing, because they wanted to attract more sales, but they didn't have the capacity to deliver or to provide as such. So online transaction was on the rise, and it's still on the rise even now. But the strategy or the approach that we took beside educating consumers and educating businesses was also to name and shame those businesses who has trends of taking consumers' money but not delivering. We issued press release against those businesses to ensure that consumers, they are on the guard, or they are conscious when they are dealing or when they are transacting with those brands. However, as the Ombud office, we also do a survey to check our fit in the industry. Are we serving, or are we delivering on our mandate? So we do give survey to customers to rate us. So this slide is showing how consumers are satisfied about us. We have issued a survey to 7,897 complainants, but 24% of them responded. So we ask questions like, are you happy with the outcome? Are you being kept up to date? The outcome was explained to you to your satisfactory, and so forth. So the same is being done also to the suppliers, the businesses. We do issue them the survey to rate our service. So this is the outcome of the survey towards the businesses. Going forward, what is our aim as the office? We aim to process cases faster and more efficiently without impacting on budget or reducing the level of equality, care, and attention directed to each matter. We aim to drive an awareness campaign around jurisdiction referrals, encouraging consumers to check with us first before submitting an online complaint, as they may already be a consumer body whose job is it to assist them. And another aim is to work closely with regulators and industry bodies to plug regulatory gaps around e-commerce transactions. We aim to continue to expose fraudulent online merchants and warn consumers accordingly. That is us as Consumer Goods and Services Ombud. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I will then introduce our next speaker, who is Kwanda Vabaza from Ombudsman for Banking Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. That was very, very informative. Let me just quickly share my slides. Can you see the slide?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so I'm the only one who's not seeing them. Sorry, just let's see. Okay, perfect. Again, thank you for that presentation. My name is Kwanda Vabaza, and I'm the communications manager at the Ombudsman for Banking Services. I will basically share about who we are, our
Sorry,
jurisdiction.
Kwanda,
yes,
we cannot see your slides, sir.
Oh, have they disappeared now?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, but I had this one locked up. Share. How about now?
Yes, sir, we can see your slide now.
Again, I'm the only one who's not seeing them. Let me just quickly do this. Okay. So if anyone can just make a suggestion on how do I see my presentation, that'd be helpful.
We're able to see you scrolling through the slides. I'm just not sure how to get you to see the presentations. Are you comfortable to proceed without the slides?
Okay, can you see them?
We can see them. So we can see your first slide with your introduction on the Ombudsman for Banking Services.
Okay, sorry about that. I think let me just proceed with my presentation. As I said, my name is Gwanda Vabaza, and I'm the Communications Manager at the Ombudsman for Banking Services. So who are we as an office? So we are an alternative dispute resolution body that hires professional lawyers to receive, investigate, and resolve disputes between banks and their customers for free of charge. So banking customers who have complaints against their banks can come to us, and we offer that service for free of charge. Now, we have seen that a lot of people are not aware of our existence, and they go and instruct lawyers, as in pay lawyers, to come and assist them with their banking issues. And we've seen a lot of these lawyers, they come to our office, present the matters to us, and we do all the work, and then they go back and present our work to the people. Now, we have embarked on a serious awareness campaign to try and inform people about our existence and to encourage them that our services are free, like I said, and that our process is basically very informal, very easy, and very, very cheap for them. But like I said, we still are finding people who are referring their matters to us through lawyers. Sorry. So what is our vision? So we definitely want to be known as a trusted mediator of disputes. We do this by proactively engaging in awareness campaigns through our press releases, where we inform people of the various issues that are affecting banking customers. In those press releases, we also inform people, or we discuss case studies, actual matters that came before our office, and we basically inform people as to what mistakes they made. For instance, if we're dealing with fraudulent scams, so we inform people as to the scams, the mistakes they made, and we inform people as to how, as an office, we investigate those matters. And in instances where we've received or we've encouraged or recommended to the banks to refund those people, we give reasons as to why we made those recommendations. And again, in most of the cases, it will be because, for instance, the bank failed to act immediately to stop the customer's funds from being withdrawn by the fraudster. So again, our mission is definitely, we are committed to resolving disputes between banks and customers in a fair, free, and independent forum. That is obviously our dispute resolution or alternative dispute resolution platform that we're offering. And what is our jurisdiction? So in most cases, or in fact, in all the cases, before we convert them into formal files, we first need to establish whether that matter falls within our jurisdiction. How do we go about doing that? So we have a checklist, and in that checklist, before any complaint can be opened, we must first establish whether the person, that is the complainant, is a customer of the bank. So you must definitely be a customer of the bank before we can entertain the matter. If you are not a customer of the bank, unfortunately, that matter will fall outside of our jurisdiction. And secondly, the complaint that is before or that is brought before our office must be about a product or service that is received from a bank, or advice relating to a product or service. Now, what is a product? A product would be, for instance, a home loan, a home loan account, a savings account, or a check account. And a service would be internet banking. If any person has a complaint relating to those, they can come to us. Thirdly, the complainant must have suffered loss, or there must have been some distress or inconvenience that they've experienced as a result of negligence or wrongdoing on the part of the bank. And if the complaint is brought by an independent party, that is a natural person, then that complainant must be claiming less than 2 million rands. If it's more than 2 million, it falls beyond or it exceeds our jurisdiction. And then if the complaint is brought about by a juristic person, then the turnover of that organization may not exceed 10 million. Again, I need to qualify that statement. We do receive matters where the turnover does exceed the 10 million. However, if the banks do not object to us hearing that matter and investigating that matter, then we continue, we proceed, we open a formal file and we make a finding based on obviously the facts presented. Which matters fall outside of our jurisdiction? So we again find people who bring matters that are before the courts. So matters that are before the courts automatically or prima facie, they fall outside of our jurisdiction. But there is a proviso. So we as the Ombudsman for Banking Services actually have the final say as to whether the matter will fall outside of our jurisdiction or not. It's not the banks that decide on our jurisdiction. So we have the discretion to decide. So if, for instance, a matter is before another ombud or another body that has jurisdiction, and that matter was sent to by the bank, let's say especially the courts. So the banks have taken legal action. Complainant has come to office for assistance. If we read the file and we see that there is actually something that the bank has to answer to, so we go back to the bank, we inform the bank that this matter will be investigated by our office. And fortunately, the banks, I think because of the relationship that we have with them, they cease all legal action. They allow us to investigate the dispute. And only after we've done investigating and we've sent through our findings, will they then either accept our recommendations or if the matter is decided against the consumer, then the banks will then proceed with legal action. Yes, like I said, there are matters that obviously are brought through by lawyers on behalf of consumers. We do entertain those matters. We, unfortunately, at that point, do not inform consumers to abandon their lawyers. They do have a right to legal representation, and it is not for us to inform them not to use those lawyers. Our process. So consumers, before lodging formal complaints with the office, they're encouraged to first refer the dispute to their banks. So they send through their dispute to their banks, and then their banks are given about 20 days, 20 working days to try and engage with the customer to resolve the matter. If in those 20 days, the dispute is not resolved to the satisfaction of the complainant, or if the bank simply does not respond to the customer, then the customer can then come to our office and we will then open a formal file in those cases. So once we have opened a formal file, it takes about, again, 4 months for our office to resolve those disputes. So the maximum period that we allow ourselves to resolve disputes is 4 months. And again, that 4 months is dependent on the complexity of the matter. Most of the matters that are investigated by our office, I think in 2021, we had over 8,000 complaints, and I think about 129 or so complaints were over the 4-month period. But all other complaints were resolved way within 3 months, the 3-month period. So it is definitely our aim to resolve disputes as soon as possible. Like I said, if it is an easy matter, we definitely aim to resolve those complaints within a month or two. But if it is complicated, some of the matters, they go beyond the 100 or the 4-month period, 120 days period. But again, that's an exception rather than a rule. Key trends. Now, we, like I said, receive a lot of complaints. Any person who has an issue with their bank and it relates to a banking product or a service come to our office. So we receive complaints relating to home loans, vehicle finance, ATMs, check accounts, closure of bank accounts, complaints about fees and charges, or people being listed at the credit bureaus and disputing that listing. So it's various matters. As long as it has to do with the bank, we investigate it. our top complaints will definitely be internet banking. We receive a lot of internet banking complaints. We receive a lot of online banking complaints. We receive a lot of credit card complaints and funds being incorrectly credited into accounts, ATM fraud. But again, in those matters, it is normally people who have fallen victim to fraud. What type of fraud? For instance, with internet banking, we see a lot of people clicking into links, and in those links, they directed to insert their confidential banking information. Now, once they've done that, people unfortunately believe that the link that they're clicking on is from their bank. So believing that, they insert their correct online banking details or internet banking details, basically then giving the fraudsters their confidential passwords, which then the fraudsters use to empty their accounts. Again, when we do our press releases, we educate people, we inform people, and I need to say this, it's not just only the Ombudsman for Banking Services that educates or creates awareness about these scams. We've seen SABRIC, they do that. We've seen individual banks doing that. We know BASA does that, the Banking Association of South Africa. They do educate customers as to the potential fraud scams that are out there. But we still find a lot of people falling victim to this type of fraud. With regard to fees and charges, we note that people conclude agreements. They sign on agreements without reading and understanding the consequences of entering into such agreements. Later on, after they've signed, they come disputing the fees or disputing the charges that are being debited when those charges are clearly noted in the agreement. Now, in investigating those complaints, we make sure that the charges are definitely being charged or debited in line with the agreement itself, and that they're not contrary to the National Credit Act. If, yes, we do find that the bank is contradicting the contract or the terms of the National Credit Act, then we make an appropriate recommendation. And in most instances, it would mean that the bank, for instance, if it is a home loan and there's an issue with the service fees that are charged, then it will affect, obviously, the outstanding balance in that the interest that has been or that was debited was wrong. So the bank will need to reconcile the whole account and then come back with a reconciliation statement that shows the before the recon and the after the recon account. And then once we've satisfied ourselves as to the correctness of the measures taken by the bank, we then send those to the complainant with our explanation as to why we believe that the bank, the measures taken by the bank address the issue. If the complainant is satisfied, then the matter is resolved. If they're not satisfied, we allow them to present their case as to why they believe that the balance that is presented is incorrect. And we then forward that to the bank. So we do this process up until the matter is resolved. At the end of the day, it is for us to decide as to what is fair and what is reasonable. We do still receive a lot of complaints regarding ATMs, but previously a lot of people fell victim to card cloning or phantom withdrawals. But what we're seeing currently is that a lot of people are falling victim to what is called a card swap. So they go to the ATM, they insert their card, there is a problem there at the ATM, and then they accept assistance from a stranger. In accepting that assistance, customer's card is compromised as well as the PIN. And whilst the customer is standing there at the ATM, there's transactions taking place elsewhere. Now, we encourage consumers never to accept assistance from strangers or from a security guard or from anyone who says they're working from for the bank, as long as that person is standing there at the ATM. If someone has an issue there at the ATM, we encourage them to cancel the transaction, to go into the branch and speak to a teller for assistance, but do not accept assistance from strangers. Despite this, a lot of people are still falling victim to this type of fraud. Then Omar mentioned, or the Consumer Goods Ombudsman, they mentioned issues with regard to online transactions. Now, again, we also see a lot of scams relating to online transactions. And these are scams where consumers, again, they called, we refer to this as phishing. So consumers are called by someone claiming to be from the bank. They ask for their confidential online or access credentials. For instance, they ask for their card number, they ask for their CVV number, then after that, they ask for the OTP that they receive once a transaction is done by the fraudster. Now, again, we always tell people that there is no bank or legitimate person from a bank that will call a customer, ask them for their CVV number, for their card number, and most importantly, for their OTP. At this point, I think it is important to just mention that consumers often say that the person who called already had the card information. They had the card number, they had the CVV number. But what we try and inform people is that, yes, the fraudster may have that information, but as long as they do not have the OTP, the one-time PIN that is sent to authenticate the transaction, no transaction will take place. So in investigating those matters, we again look at whether there was a compromise from the side of the consumer. Now, that is difficult to prove, but fortunately, a lot of consumers who come and lodge a complaint to us, they inform us that actually they received a call and that the person asked for their card number, believing that they were talking from a legitimate caller from the bank. They provide the information. But there are instances where some of the consumers, they dispute receiving a call. So in investigating those issues, we then request the bank to provide us with proof of whether there was a SIM swap. Now, if there was a SIM swap, then the chances are the fraudsters received the OTP. Therefore, the customer did not authenticate the transaction. So we fought with banks as to what should happen in those cases. And luckily, we came to an understanding and an arrangement or an agreement that the banks will refund some of those transactions, as long as it is clear that the customer did not compromise their information. Thank you. Now, with the case studies, I think the case studies that I've mentioned, or the examples that I've mentioned, are basically the issues or the case studies that we normally share with consumers or with the public whenever we release our press releases. So again, as a tip, and as my last words regarding this presentation, I will definitely say that consumers should make sure that they read and make sure that they understand. And if they do not know English, then they need to ask the bank, the person assisting them, to explain the agreement in a language that they understand. It is their right. Our last press release was on consumer rights, and we do inform consumers that they do have a right to request for an agreement that is in their language. If the bank cannot do that, then the next thing that they can request for is for that agreement to be summarized, especially the material terms of the agreement, to be summarized in their language, or have someone explain that agreement in their language before they sign the agreement. Because once you've signed the agreement, unfortunately, you are bound by your signature, and it is difficult, almost impossible, then to overturn or to request the bank to cancel their agreement and enter into a new agreement on the basis that the consumer never understood. Secondly, a bank will never call a customer and request for their banking details, if especially the card number, the CVV number, and the OTP. If someone someone says that they're from the bank and they're requesting for that information, it is a fraudster. It is a fraudster, and then consumers are encouraged then to immediately hang up, call the bank. Call the bank's fraud department, not any other department. You call the bank's fraud department, and then liability then shifts to the bank. As soon as you've made that call, liability shifts to the bank. It is for the bank to try and mitigate your losses if it happens that you've compromised your information. Thirdly, consumers are definitely encouraged not to accept assistance at ATMs. If you do accept an assistance from a stranger at the ATM and you suffer loss, unfortunately, that loss is for your account and the bank will not be held liable. Again, there's been a dispute as to when is the time of reporting. As an office, we have agreed with the banks that as soon as the customer makes the call, not when the bank answers the call, it is when the customer has made the call to the bank's fraud department. That is the time we consider as the time of reporting. And if the banks then took long to answer the call and during that time fraud happens, the bank will be liable to refund those transactions. That is it for me, and thank you for that. I think our next speaker is Ipeleng.
Just waiting, sharing.
Oh.
Good morning, everyone. Once again, thank you, OSTI, for extending an invitation to our office to participate in this year's consumer workshop. My name is Ipeleng Ntwa, and I am currently the Acting Deputy Director for Communication and Media Unit within the Joburg Ombudsman's office. And joining me in the latter part of the presentation is my esteemed colleague, Advocate Xolani Gila, who is the Acting Executive Manager for Complaints and Investigations. The Office of the Ombudsman was established by Council through enacting the City of Johannesburg Ombudsman's bylaw in September 2014, but officially opened its doors in July 2015. Even though the office is an institution of the municipality and is accountable to Council, it remains impartial when exercising its powers, duties, and functions without fear, favor, or prejudice. Council, together with its political structures and administration, are required within the bylaws to not only not interfere with the functioning of the office, but also assist in protecting but is also required to assist in protecting our independence, credibility, influence, and efficacy. Our head office is in Braamfontein, although we have a regional footprint within the 7 regions of the city of Johannesburg, primarily in their customer service centers. These include Region A, which is your Midrand and Fourways areas, Region B, your Randburg, Auckland Park, Region C, your Roodepoort and Northgate, Region D would be your Soweto areas, Region E, your Alexandra, Sandton and Houghton, Region F would be your inner city and Johannesburg South. And lastly, Region G would be Orange Farm and Eldorado Park areas. We are able to reach these communities through our Joburg Ombudsman Ambassadors Program, which was launched last year in July. And this program consists of 25 young graduates within the disciplines of communication, corporate governance, and finance and legal. As an office, we are an office of last instance that contributes towards the acceleration of service delivery and the promotion of human rights by investigating complaints of alleged maladministration in order to improve consumer confidence and increase accountability in the City of Johannesburg's various departments and entities. Our values are to remain impartial, to be accessible, accountable, have integrity, and offer a human-centered approach, and of course, be transparent. To you, Advocate Gila.
All right, thank you, Ibi, and good morning to the rest of the colleagues, and thank you for the invite. I'm Xolani Gila from the Office of the Ombudsman. I'll take you through to our functions. When we deal with our functions, I would like to indicate that we normally receive complaints in twofold. Firstly, by being approached by complainants who are going to lodge complaints directly with our office. Secondly, we also initiate our own investigations. If we do pick up a story through different media platforms, we also initiate that kind of investigations and we investigate the matter. Now, on cases that we investigate, we focus on contraventions of Municipal Systems Act, amongst other things, failure to comply with the provisions of the Municipal Systems Act, because our role is to ensure that municipalities, they comply with various legislations, policies in the process of delivering the services to the residents of the city. We also look at cases of maladministration in the affairs of the municipality, which have a result of complainants that would approach us or the residents of the city suffering any prejudice as a result of the action of the municipality. And also we look at cases where there's an abuse or an unjustifiable exercise of power. That will be through the administration or the official of the administration. Just before I go to the intake and register process, I think it's also quite important that I mention that there are also cases that do not fall within the ambit or the scope of the Office of the Ombudsman. For an example, if there's any legislative or executive decision that has been taken by council, and if that decision has an impact on the residents of the city, we cannot be able to investigate such a complaint. And also any matter in which there is a legal proceeding that have commenced or that is likely to commence. For an example, if the residents of the city has received summons, it could be through an outstanding account from the city. Such cases we cannot be able to investigate because there is a process that has been, or rather the process that has commenced in our legal system. And also cases relating to prosecution of offenders, that would be your criminal cases. We then also refer such cases. So what will actually happen when we do an assessment, if it falls outside our scope, would provide an assistance by referring the complainant to an appropriate forum or appropriate body. In some instances, we would receive complaints against councillors because we're in the sphere of local government. And also those cases, they fall outside our scope, but there is an integrity commission within the city that accepts such complaints to investigate the conduct of councillors. Coming to our intake and register process, this is a unit that receives our complaints. So it's your first-hand experience with the Office of the Ombuds. So when you're walking to our office, this is the unit that accepts you to receive your complaints. So we receive complaints or we accept complaints in various forms through emails, walk-in. There are also complaint boxes that are located or situated in various regions within the city. And this is to ensure that the Office of the Ombuds services are accessible to the residents of the city. So basically you do not have to travel from Orange Farm all the way to Braamfontein. The Orange Farm region G, can be able to assist you in as far as your complaint is concerned. In terms of the process, once we have received that complaint, we acknowledge the complaint within 14 days, and thereafter there is a process that we call an assessment committee, where they will go through all the complaints that have been received to assess them and to establish whether they fall within the scope of the ombuds, and thereafter respond to the complainant. Next slide, TP. All right, there is a complaint and investigation process. So after that process of assessment of these complaints, once a complaint has been accepted, it then gets to be allocated to an investigator. An investigator will then contact the complainant within 5 days to consult and confirm the contents of that complaint before he or she proceeds to raise the complaint with the relevant department or entity of the city. And how we then raise those complaints, we draft what we call an allegation letter. It's correspondence that contains what has been brought to our attention by the complainant. and we allow the city a period of 14 days, which is it's an opportunity for them to conduct their own investigation and provide us with their response. And in the process, we also ensure that we provide our complainants with an update in as far as the process of investigation is concerned. We also conduct formal investigations and produce reports with findings and recommended corrective actions. With regard to our resolutions, we resolve our complaints within a period of 3 to 6 months, depending on complexity of matters. And type of complaints that we deal with. I'm sure everyone in this platform know the issue of billing within the city of Johannesburg. It's one of the complaints that we normally deal with, and we have conducted an own instance investigation in respect of this. Those investigations were against Joburg Water, City Power, and Pick It Up, as well as the Revenue Department, because those are the departments that would mostly get high numbers in as far as those complaints are concerned. Waste management, potholes, and that what I'd like to do is to talk to these waste management potholes that then talks to service delivery issues. If I can maybe just make a reference to 1 or 2 cases that will talk to this, because what we believe in is that when there's a failure to deliver a certain service by the municipality, then that service, or rather that failure, it has an impact on the consumer's rights or the residents of the city, the rights that are enshrined in the Bill of Rights. I'll just quickly make an example of one of the cases. As I've indicated before, what we normally do, we don't wait for complainants. We also take our own initiative and investigate these cases. So it could be either a case that came through a social media platform. For example, a case where a woman approached one of the fire stations in Cosmos City, seeking assistance of an ambulance. She was heavily pregnant, and at the time when she approached them, she was not allowed inside the premises. She was just given a phone number of the ambulance to contact, and then she was told that, no, you can go home and then call them, they will come and assist you. On her way, when she was walking home, and this is her submission to us as the Office of the Ombuds, she started to feel pains and she couldn't walk any longer, and she gave birth in the bush. And this is a case we picked up in the social media. We had to then investigate or initiate an investigation, but at the finality of it, it was established that there was a failure from the officials to assist the woman, because there is an emergency room within the fire stations where she could have been taken to be assisted while they were waiting for the ambulance to assist her. And we then had to recommend that disciplinary proceedings should be initiated against the relevant employee or official, and they should update the Office of the Ombudsman in as far as those proceedings are concerned. A quick one, another case again. So if you look at that case, it then have an impact of affecting the rights to healthcare services, because everyone has the right to access healthcare services. And then there was an infringement upon that right. And there was another case in Protea South, a 64-year-old man who did not have a shelter. He has applied, he's been on the waiting list for an RDP house since 2005. We picked up that case in one of the media platforms, and then we had to investigate. He was actually literally staying in his car in Protea South for all these years. We then had to raise this matter with the housing department, and through the Office of the Ombudsman intervention, her case was also treated as a special case, and it was prioritized because looking at her age and as well as when he has been on the waiting list, then they recommended that he be allocated to one of the projects that were initiated by the city in Lufurei. So he was assisted through the Office of the Ombudsman. So it then shows the importance of the institutions of this nature, that they are quite assisting the residents, or rather the citizens of the country. So these institutions are quite helpful. If you look at cases, that we get to investigate and resolve. Thank you. And this then talks to how you get how you get in touch with the Office of the Ombudsman. We've got the help desk number, which is showing on the screen. There's also a WhatsApp line. We also have an email address, and there is a website where you can be able to also check the services of the Office of the Ombudsman for the City of Johannesburg. And these various platforms, this is to ensure that we're accessible to the residents of the city. Thank you. Thank you. That will be the end of our presentation, and thank you again for the opportunity. And the next speaker will be Kabelo Teme from Credit Ombudsman. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Just a bit of a change to the agenda. I will hand over to Mr. Lucius Badibe from the Motor Industry Ombud, and he will present before me, and I will present after him. Thank you. Over to you, Lucius.
Goeiemôre dames en heren, manene na manenekazi. Program Director, thank you very much for effecting these changes. I am participating in an industry compliance in BRETS together with the local consumer affairs and other stakeholders. I hope you are able to see my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we are.
Oh, okay. Now there we are. Okay. My name is Lucius Badibe. Program Director, please allow me to introduce the Motor Industry Ombudsman of South Africa, in short, MIOSA. The MIOSA is an accredited ombuds scheme that provides for an impartial and independent alternative dispute resolution platform where complaints has reached deadlock between consumers and the South African automotive industry participant. We draw our mandate from the Consumer Protection Act 68 of 2008, the South African Automotive Industry Code of Conduct, and the regulations thereto. According to the preamble of the CPA, ladies and gentlemen, it was enacted for, amongst other things, to promote and to protect economic interests of consumers, to improve access to quality information that is necessary so that consumers are able to make informed choices according to their individual needs and wishes. And it was enacted also to develop effective means of redress for consumers. The Consumer Protection Act has 122 sections and is divided into 7 chapters. However, for the purpose of today's presentations, we will only focus on the function of the MIOSA and the obligations of suppliers in terms of complaints. It is important to give a list of people who can approach the ombuds for assistance. It includes a person acting on his or her own behalf, an authorized person acting on behalf of another person who cannot act in his or her own name, a person acting as a member of or in the interest of a group or class of affected person, person acting in the public interest with leave of the tribunal or court, as the case may be, and an association acting in the interest of its members. In other words, Santago, for example, can act on behalf of their member. What is the role of the MIOSA within the automotive industry? We promote a spirit of fair play between the automotive industry participants and consumers. We resolve complaints impartially and objectively and as expeditiously as possible, bearing in mind that delay in resolving complaints can impact on the livelihood of consumers and can also lead to reputational damage to the industry participants and their respective brands. We contribute towards the continuous improvement of customer care as well as relationships amongst participants in the motor industry to the benefit of all parties concerned. This slide, I must just explain here. Let us say, for example, you bought a car to commute between home and work, but amongst other things, you drop your kids off at school before you go to work. Now, if this vehicle is at the dealership for repairs continuously, then your family will be disrupted. So the Ombud is able to recommend to the dealer to provide you with alternative transport for the period of repairs. This is a gesture of goodwill. It's not a must. Except for drawing our mandate from the CPA and the code, we are at all times guided by the following considerations. Principles of natural justice. We afford all the parties equal opportunity to impart their side of story. Good engineering practices. This is the function of the motor industry ombudsman is complex. Let's say your engine has overheated and you took it to the dealer for re-engineering or for overhauling. And within a week or two, the same problem is still there. Now, when you approach the ombudsman's office, we then ask the dealer to strip the engine, and we then appoint an independent assessor to analyze that engine piece by piece to determine the nature and the cause of failure. And that report would then enable our office to make an informed decision or to reach an informed conclusion. However, we do have technical managers in our office. Some complaints they can assess themselves through the job cards and through the quotations to see if the dealership in repairing your engine did apply good engineering practices. We are fair and impartial, and the service is for free, except in a case where, let us say, the consumer is in Port Elizabeth and we are based in Johannesburg, and the dealer has stripped the engine for assessment. Then you understand that we will need an independent assessor to go and assess the damage on the engine. So the cost to travel would be payable by a consumer, but it goes straight into the pocket of the assessor. It does not come into the MIOSA's pocket. As a custodian of the industry code, we have a duty to ensure compliance within the automotive industry and to conduct ongoing awareness in order to educate and create awareness for consumers and all the automotive industry participants on motor-related matters within the Act. This is one of the reasons why I'm in Bujanala districts this week. Yesterday, we did compliance visits on the automotive industry together with police and other stakeholders. And the compliance inspections are continuing today as we speak, and I will be joining them at a later age. We're going to go to the next slide, which is the termination of disputes and the response duration. We receive complaints manually or via online. Manual application is where consumer completes and submits a complaint form in person, via fax or email. And we also have an online application platform that is web-based. Consumers can visit the website and log their complaints. This system generates a reference number instantly, the name and the email address of a case manager to whom the complaint has been assigned. Now you see, there's no longer 24 or 48-hour waiting period for a reference number. Within a split of a second, you have a direct access to the case manager who's handling your case. After we receive the complaint, it goes through evaluation process, and the complainant is immediately notified if the matter falls within the ambit of the MIOSA or not. This is to enable the consumer to explore other platforms for redress without wasting time. Because we belong to a forum called Consumer Protection Forum, we have what we call a referral protocol. Referral protocol is like a no wrong door policy. If a consumer, for example, walks into our premises and complain about an insurance or complain about something that's got to do with banking ombud, we don't turn the consumer away. We then log the complaint on the system and then refer it to the other ombud scheme and give a consumer a letter to say, listen, from now on, this matter would be dealt with, for example, by Consumer Goods and Services Ombud. So we don't turn consumers away anymore. Because we subscribe to the principles of natural justice, we notify the respondent, be it a selling dealer or a service provider, of the alleged contravention in writing. And in terms of the South African Automotive Industry Code of Conduct, the respondent is obligated to respond to MIOSA within 10 days of receiving such notifications. In terms of the code, which is the South African Automotive Industry Code of Conduct, we are required to make a determination or to finalize a matter 8 weeks after we've received all the documents that are necessary to assist us to bring the matter to finality. I'm going to hop to the other slide, which is the obligations by suppliers regarding this complaint. Ladies and gentlemen, this slide that you're looking at the moment, we have supplied it to more than 12,500 service providers across the country. And I'm working with this slide in my hand. We have printed an A3 document that we give to dealerships to display it at their reception so that consumers can know what their rights are. This document is a key performance area of a dealership. It says here, a supplier must establish an internal complaints handling process, including the following: an internal complaints handling department, a suitable complaints resolution procedure, a process to be followed by a consumer in order for such complaint to be logged with Motor Industry Ombudsman. The supplier must display in or at all trading premises that a notice that reflects that there's a code which binds them. And when requested so by consumers and at no cost, they must provide consumers with the contact details of their internal complaints handling department, if any, or of the supplier. And they also are obligated to give the consumer our contact details and the processes to be followed by the consumer in order for the consumer to log a complaint. They have an obligation to train their staff in respect of the Act, the CPA, the regulations as issues from time again, and the code as amended from time to time, and the general principles and procedures on effective handling of complaints. Suppliers are obligated to attempt to resolve complaints and disputes in accordance with the spirit and provisions of this code, the Act and regulations, and the spirit and provisions of dispute resolution procedures. The supplier must resolve a complaint within 30 days. If the supplier cannot resolve a complaint within 30 days, then they must inform a consumer well in advance that they are unable to resolve a complaint within that period. How do consumers access our service? We have information and liaison center that operates from Monday to Friday between 8:30 and 4:30. Consumers can call to seek advice or to inquire about progress of their complaints. However, in our endeavor to give consumers more access to our service, we have established an online request system. Like I've explained, the system generates a reference number instantly, provides an email address of a person who will be handling your complaint. And since the inception of this system, the response and complaint duration has improved tremendously. We are currently fine-tuning this system so that in the near future, consumers can be able to track progress of their complaints online. Our collaboration with the provincial consumer protection offices, regulators, and various government departments. This collaboration through the Consumer Protection Forum has enabled the MIOSA to conduct ongoing awareness programs across the country. We have extended these programs to the rural areas where consumers have limited access to information and have increased our footprint in those areas for the past 10 years. We support all the consumer protection offices with handling of automotive and motor-related complaints, and we also provide them with technical advice. We also provide support to all the consumer courts across the country. Remember, we have 9 provinces in the country. However, at the moment, we have only 8 consumer courts. The 8th one was only launched 2 weeks ago in Durban. My colleague Kwanda Kabelo Time and also Oma were there. They witnessed the launching of a consumer tribunal. We conduct regular compliance visits and awareness campaigns on the automotive industry. That's the reason why I am here today. We are empowered by the Section 163 of the South African Automotive Industry Code of Conduct to empower dealerships, to educate them about their obligations in terms of helping their consumers. How do consumers identify a dealership that is compliant with the South African Automotive Industry Code of Conduct, and that the dealer has registered with the MIOSA, and that this dealership where I'm buying a car from, they have what we call an ADR function. In other words, if I have a problem, they will then approach this complaint with humility and also engage with the Motor Industry Ombudsman should the complaint reach deadlock. The last slide is our telephone numbers. email address. I think my colleagues know my my direct email addresses. I mean, in case they need some assistance outside of the setup, but that will share at a later stage. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I will now hand over to Tobile Masina, if I'm right. And Program Director, thank you very much for understanding my situation. I will be joining police and other colleagues to march alongside the streets of Brest to make sure that dealerships are compliant with the regulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Budibe. As mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, there has been a bit of a change to the program, and I am doing my presentation now. And once I am done, then Tobile Masina from the FAIS Ombud will continue thereafter. Please confirm whether you guys can see my presentation.
Yes, we are, and goodbye.
Thank you very much. Okay, as I said, my name is Kabelo Time, and I am from the Office of the Credit Ombud. And just a quick introduction, or rather, if I can just, thank you. Background of the Office of the Credit Ombud. The Ombud Office is an ombud with jurisdiction in terms of the Financial Services Ombud Scheme Act, and received recognition from the FSOS Council in 2006. The Credit Ombud is registered as a public benefit organization with SARS, and just like most of my other colleagues and other Ombud officers, we do receive funding from the industry and not from the government. We started operations in March 2004, and at the time, we were only focused in dealing with credit information, that is information that is listed at the credit bureaus. And only in January 2010 did we start accepting complaints with regards to your non-bank credit agreements. That means that we will not take any banking queries as they go to the Ombudsman for banking services. Our mission statement is that we will effectively resolve disputes between members of the credit industry and credit receivers, that would be your consumers and businesses, with regards to credit and credit information matters. Again, I do emphasize that that would be your non-bank credit information matters. And we act as an educator of the public in matters pertaining to the credit industry. My colleague Lucius did mention that we usually meet on the field when we travel, and with these consumer awareness campaigns, we try as best as we possibly can to even reach the unreachables. That would be in rural places. We go basically anywhere. I always tell people that basically my car can get to any place in South Africa. And we will also at all times act honestly, independently, and fairly, balancing the rights of all parties. The CEO our office offers our services for free with all non-bank credit bureau and credit agreement related matters. That would be overcharging of interest or fees, prescription of debt, that would be debt if at all. With prescription of debt, just to quickly explain what that is, that would be if at all you've got a debt and it has been dormant for a period of 3 years. That would be if at all as a consumer you have not acknowledged debt, you have not received any summons from the credit provider, and you have not made any payment towards the debt. That means that the debt can prescribe and therefore can be written off completely. And we also deal with reckless lending, debt collection issues, fraud matters, emolument attachment orders, as we know them as garnishee orders, and as well as being listed unfairly or incorrectly at the credit bureaus with either a judgment, default, or payment profile. So should there be any information basically that you want to dispute on your credit bureau report, you log your dispute with the credit bureau first and give them 20 working days to resolve your matter. And if they do not come back to you within the 20 working days, or if at all a consumer is not happy with the outcome from the credit bureau, we can take the matter. And that also includes any matters that you want to log regarding your credit agreements. Now, today, I want to mainly focus on statements of accounts. As mentioned, that we deal with a number of disputes, but statements of accounts have actually been the trend at the Office of the Credit Ombud in 2021, and year to date, we receive, and now the thing is with statements of accounts, there are a number of categories categories, that go under statements of accounts. That would be your interest charges, collection charges, services, products, value-added services, and handover costs, requests for statements of accounts, in duplum, etc. But today I want to focus on in duplum. Now, our case study is about a consumer who logged a complaint with our office saying that, as usual, I have been paying my account for years and years and years. However, the balance does not seem to decrease even though I am making my payments. And upon our investigation, we found that actually the consumer had defaulted on their account and the account had been handed over for collection. Now, with that though, the interest charges after the account was handed over had exceeded what was allowed in terms of the in duplum rule as per the National Credit Act. I will go in detail with the in duplum rule. And also we found that the consumer also had wanted to close that account once it had been paid up. Now, to quickly explain the in duplum rule as per section 103 subsection 5 in the National Credit Act, that I'm basically going to summarize it to say that if at all a certain default amount by the time of the default, if at all the amount is, for example, 500, if at all, once it has been handed over, the amount that, including interest, including all the other added fees, may not exceed the initial default amounts, the principal debt that basically was under the credit agreement as the time that the default occurs. So if at all at default, the amount was 500 Rand, that means that if at all it gets handed over, after the handover, it may not exceed 1,000 Rand basically with all the added fees and interest charges. And based on our findings, the case outcome was that the balance was then decreased to the correct amount, and the consumer was able to settle the account as the result of that adjustment. The consumer also received their paid up letter and the account was closed as the consumer had initially requested. Now, what's very important that we need to learn when it comes to closing your account, and this is also something that we try to emphasize as much as we possibly can, and with each and every single case that we do receive, we see it as well as an opportunity to educate the consumer about their rights and also their responsibilities. Now, with an account being paid up, it is very important to know that it does not mean that it will automatically be closed. And as a consumer, if you do not intend on using it in future, then you need to inform your credit provider that once I have paid up the account, may I please have not only my paid up account, but also prove that the account has been closed. And therefore, the credit provider will also update your credit profile, because if they do not do so, if you do not communicate that you no longer want to make use of this account, then what will happen is that the account will still reflect as open and current on your credit profile. And we know that if that happens, then consumer goes, and sometimes it may affect them, their chances of then also getting credit in future if at all the account does not state the correct information. So therefore, it is very important to also note that as a consumer, if at all the credit provider has provided you with your paid up letter and the proof that you've closed your account, and you see that when you check your credit profile that it has not been updated, you do have the right to approach the credit bureaus and request that they actually update your credit information. And this is how consumers now may contact our offices. Now, being a national office, we understand that not every consumer can actually come to our offices that are based in Johannesburg. Therefore, we have all of these contact details. We have our call center line, and most importantly, also our SMS line, as we understand that not everybody has got access to the internet as well. So we have their free SMS line where they can just simply SMS the word help to 44786, and our office, our agents will be able to just call them back and assist them efficiently and effectively with their dispute disputes. We are also on Twitter and Facebook at Credit_Ombud, and at Facebook is at Credit Ombud. And it is very vital to also note that we will only take a case after the consumer has received a reference number given by the credit provider or the credit bureau, and has given the credit bureau or the credit provider 20 working days to resolve their dispute. And as we had mentioned, that consumer education is a vital part of the Office of the Credit Ombud, and we try as best as we possibly can to reach to those who also are unreachable. Thank you very much. And I will hand over then to Tobile Masina.
Okay, I think everyone can see. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can see me. I tried to find an area with a bit of decent lighting. So like Kabelo mentioned, my name is Tobile Masina. I am an assistant ombud with the Office of the Ombud for Financial Services Providers. And today I'll just be taking you through, sorry, I just want to share my presentation. I'll be taking you some general information on the FAIS Ombud Office, but I will also then just be focusing on some of the common complaints that our office deals with. Okay, I just want to. Okay. All right, so I'll also then just towards the end of the presentation just be focusing on some of the common complaints that we do deal with as an office. But just to get us started, I just want to do a brief introduction on the FAIS Ombud Office itself. So what is the FAIS Ombud Office? So the FAIS Ombud Office was established in terms of Section 20 of the Financial Advisory and Intermediary Services Act. And the objective of the Ombud is to consider and dispose of complaints in a procedurally fair, informal, economical, and expeditious manner, and by reference to what is equitable in all the circumstances. And when we deal with complaints, we do so with due regard to the contractual arrangement or other legal relationship between the complainant and any other party to the complaint, as well as the provisions of the FAIS Act. And when we deal with complaints, we do so independently, and we are required to be impartial in the way that we resolve the complaints. Now, just to give a bit of explanation on what the section means when it talks about procedural fairness, informal, economical, and expeditious manner. So procedural fairness, which is more fully expanded on in the rules that prescribe how the office must deal with the complaints that it receives, simply means that we have an obligation or a duty to not only inform the parties to the complaint of any allegations or statements that are made by the one party to the complaint, but we also have a legal duty to ensure that we afford the other party an opportunity to respond to those allegations or whatever statements may have been made against them. So to give an example, when we receive the complaint, we then forward that complaint to the respondent against whom the complaint has been made, and we notify the respondent that we've received this complaint, but then we also say to them, we're going to give you an opportunity to either resolve the complaint with the party that's lodged the complaint against you, or alternatively, you can respond to the allegations that have been made against you by the complainant. And once we receive that response from the respondent, we then forward that response if we feel it is necessary to do so to the complainant, and we then give them the same opportunity to respond to any counter allegations that may have been made by the respondent. And when we talk about informal, similarly to the Ombudsman for Banking Services, it's not prescribed or it's not necessary because of the way that we resolve the complaints for a party to have legal representation. This doesn't mean that we preclude any party that wishes to have legal representation from doing so, but because of the way that our complaints registration form, for example, is set up, a party that wants to lodge a complaint with our office would be able to do so even without legal assistance. And when we talk about economical, it's free to approach the office to lodge a complaint with the office, and also during the investigation and the resolution of the complaint, neither party would be required to pay any amount in order to facilitate the resolution of the complaint. So it used to be that the office used to impose a case fee, and if the matter was not resolved within a certain amount of time, then the respondent would have been obligated to pay that case fee, and that usually then would have happened at the point where all the communication has been exchanged between the parties and the officers of the view that there is a complaint for the respondent to answer to, and then the complaint proceeds to a formal investigation or even resolution by a determination. In that instance, there was a case fee that was prescribed, but that's no longer a requirement. And when we speak about expeditious, we have certain periods that the office sets for itself, so certain performance measures that we've put in place to ensure that we resolve complaints expeditiously. So we try and resolve complaints primarily within 3 months, failing that within 6 months, and then we aim to resolve at least 85% of the complaints that we receive as an office within 9 months of having received that complaint. So there are obviously certain instances when it's not possible to do so, and those circumstances when they do arise, we still do try and aim to resolve the complaint as quickly as we possibly can. So those are the factors that apply to how we try to dispose of the complaints that we receive. And also, I just want to point out that even though the section does refer to the fact that we have regard to the contractual arrangement or other legal relationship between the complainant and any other party to the complaint, as well as the provisions of the Act, those two provisions are not actually, they're not contradictory to each other, if I can put it that way. Because even though there might be a contractual arrangement that the parties have concluded, that contractual arrangement would itself still be subject to the provisions of the Act, and the parties would not be able to contract out of the law. Okay, and just to continue on what the FAIS Ombud is, and to give an example of a complaint, because I'm sure as everybody now understands, there are different Ombud schemes that investigate various complaints. So there is a specific definition of a complaint that relates to our office that would then give us the legal authority to be able to investigate that complaint. So for our purposes, a complaint means a specific complaint that relates to a financial service that is rendered by a financial services provider or a representative to the complainant. And this would have had to happen on or after the date of commencement of the Act. And in that complaint, the complainant must allege that the provider or representative contravened or failed to comply with the provision of the Act, and that as a result of their contravention or failure, the complainant has suffered or is likely to suffer financial prejudice or damage, or the complainant can allege that the provider or representative willfully or negligently rendered a financial service to them, and that they've now suffered prejudice or damage, or that they are likely to suffer prejudice or damage, or the complainant can allege that they've been treated unfairly by the provider or the representative. So before the FAIS Ombud can actually accept a complaint for assessment or for investigation, there are certain factors that the Ombud office has to consider. And those factors, the first of which is whether or not the complaint or the submissions that are made by the complainant satisfy the definition of a complaint. So we would then have to go back to the definition and look at, does the complainant make an allegation that would satisfy those provisions that I've referred to? So do they allege that there's been a contravention or a failure, or that there's been willful or negligent provision of the financial services, or that they've been treated unfairly? In the event that those allegations are not made in the manner that is prescribed by the Act, then as an office, we would not be able to assist the complainant. So when we inform the complainant, if we have to, that we aren't able to deal with their complaint, we are careful to notify them that we have not considered the merits of the complaint itself. So we have not gone in and done a full exposition of the complaint, but what we've looked at is, do your submissions meet the definition of a complaint? And then we notify them that there's nothing that prevents you from lodging a complaint as long as you do so within the time that's afforded to you. And you must now then have consideration of the provisions of the Act and what would constitute or what would satisfy the provisions of the FAIS Act as it relates to the definition of a complaint. So once we've assessed whether or not the submissions do meet the definition of a complaint, And also just to, before I move on, when we look at what a financial service is, that is also defined in Section 1 of the FAIS Act. And a financial service means any of the services that are rendered by a financial services provider. So who is a financial services provider? That simply means any person other than a representative who, as a regular feature of the business of such person, furnishes advice, or they furnish advice and render an intermediary service, or they just render an intermediary service. So once we've satisfied ourselves as to whether or not the definition of a complaint has been met by the complainant submissions, we then also have to consider whether the complaint has prescribed. Prescription just simply refers to whether or not the period that's afforded to a complainant to lodge a complaint after the action that they're complaining about has passed, whether or not that time has expired. And prescription for our purposes is dealt with in Section 27 of the Act. And Section 27 of the Act states that if a complainant lodges a complaint more than 3 years after that particular action that they're complaining about has taken place, then as an office we are required. So we don't have a choice to assess whether or not we could still proceed with the complaint. We don't exercise any discretion in that regard, but we are compelled then to dismiss the complaint. But because I suppose that the legislator understood that not everybody would be able to understand immediately once the act that they're complaining about has happened, they also made provision for the complainant for a time when the complainant would reasonably have become aware of that particular action. So if I can give an example, you invest a certain amount of money as a consumer in a particular product, or maybe you even apply for a short-term insurance product. At the time you apply for the product, you're given specific information on how the product is going to work. So for example, you told that anybody can drive the vehicle at any time, and if that person is involved in an accident or the vehicle is stolen while in their possession, then the insurer will respond positively to the complaint, to the claim that you would submit if you do so within 30 days of the incident having occurred. And then you realize after your cousin has driven the car, they've been in an accident, car is written off, you submit a claim, and the insurer says, actually only people that were named in the policy as people that would be driving the vehicle are covered in the event of an incident. So because your cousin was not specifically named as a person who would have access to the vehicle and would be driving it, we are not going to pay. So that may have happened 3 years after you initially applied for the insurance product, but you're obviously only becoming aware of the way that the financial service was rendered to you at the time that you submit the claim. So in that instance, if you reasonably or ought reasonably should have become aware of that incident that you're complaining about after the 3 years, then we consider the 3 years to run from the time when you became reasonably aware or should have become reasonably aware. So once we've moved on from prescription, the next thing we consider is the monetary value of the amount claimed by the complainant. So currently the office has a monetary jurisdiction of 800,000 Rand. So what this means is if a complainant lodges a complaint, the amount that they would like to receive in order for them to consider their complaint to be resolved must not exceed 800,000 Rand. The only time that the office can continue to investigate and deal with the complaint, even though the amount exceeds 800,000 Rand, is if the respondent against whom the complaint has been lodged consents to the office investigating that complaint. All right, so we do have some matters where the respondents do consent, and we actually have one complaint that was resolved via redetermination where the respondent had consented and the complainant was able to recover or was paid in excess of 2 million Rand as a resolution of their complaint. So the other thing that the office can do is we are also able to assess. So even though we've identified that the complaint does meet the definition of a complaint because a financial service was rendered, the complainant is not outside of the 3-year period that I referred to, so the prescription period, and the monetary value of the amount claimed is below 800,000 or the respondent has consented to us investigating even though it's above 800,000 Rand, we do also have a discretion as an office to determine whether or not it would not be more appropriate. So we know that the office has jurisdiction, but maybe it's more appropriate for the complainant to have their complaint resolved in a different forum, and this includes a court. So one of the key considerations there would be, do we have the resources as an office to be able to deal with the complaint? So an example is where the complainant alleges that the signature or the documents were not compiled by them, the signature is fraudulent, it's not their handwriting, and all of those things. If we do not have the resources to have an handwriting expert that would be able to review the documents so that we can be able to resolve the complaint appropriately, we may then say to the complainant, we don't have the skills, or we don't have the ability, the capacity to be able to assist with the complaint. So we recommend that you approach a different forum so they would be able to assist you. So complaints resolution. Once we've satisfied ourselves that this is a complaint that we can deal with as an office, one of the things that we would consider, because ordinarily the allegation would be that the financial service was not rendered in the way that it was supposed to. We would then have regard to the General Code of Conduct for Authorized Financial Services Providers, which was enacted in accordance with the FAIS Act, to assess whether or not the conduct of the FSP does in fact meet the requirements or the duties that are prescribed by the code of conduct. So a code of conduct obviously prescribes the behavior that FSPs would have to comply with when rendering financial services to a particular client. So amongst the duties that are imposed on financial services providers is, for example, the disclosure of the commission that a financial services provider would receive as a result of having rendered the financial service to the client, disclosure of key information, so terms and conditions of the policy, including when the policy might be able to respond in the manner that the complainant intends. So if it's a short-term insurance product, it's a vehicle, it covers the complainant's vehicle, when will the insurer actually satisfy a claim? So what incidents are covered in respect of that insurance policy, but also when a client receives advice from a financial services provider, there are certain things that must precede the rendering of advice to the client. So one of those is the collection of information from the client that is necessary and will enable the financial services provider to be able to determine what products would be suitable to meet the needs that the client has. And then so the compilation of the needs analysis and also the recording of the advice that was provided to a client. So we would then consider, does the conduct of the FSP meet the conduct or the duties that are imposed on them in the General Code of Conduct? And once we determine that the Code of Conduct, or rather the provider acted in a manner that complies with the duties that are imposed on them, then ordinarily we would dismiss the complaint. But if we determine that the conduct of the FSP actually falls short of the provisions of the Code of Conduct, so there's a duty or duties that they were required to comply with that they did not, and that as a result of them having failed to comply with those provisions of the code, the complainant has indeed suffered a financial loss as they have alleged, then in that instance we would recommend to the client, or rather to the FSP, to settle the matter with the complainant. So when we investigate the complaint, sorry, you may notice that I'm not following the slides in as much detail, but I'm just providing key information. So when we resolve the complaints with FSPs and complainants, one of the things that we can do is recommend to the FSP to resolve the matter with a client without the office having to issue what we call a determination, which has the same effect as a civil judgment of the court and can be enforced in a similar manner. And it is up then to the respondent whether or not to accept the recommendation. But also when we make the recommendation based on what the office determines to be the best course of action or to be the most equitable resolution in the circumstances, which aligns with Section 20, subsection 3 of the FAIS Act. So if the respondent accepts the recommendation and the complainant does not, but we determine that that recommendation and the manner in which the respondent would then settle the complaint is fair to resolve the complaint, we may also then dismiss the complaint because we then say to the complainant, we believe the offer that has been made available to you by the respondent is fair because we think that it adequately resolves the complaint. And if you refuse to accept that recommendation, then we may dismiss the complaint. So we may also then do that. So the common complaints that the office receives, so like I've mentioned, we first have to look at the definition. We also look at whether or not the complaint has prescribed. We give the respondent an opportunity to resolve, and then the respondent can elect to resolve the complaint, or they can provide the office with information that would enable the office to then be able to investigate the complaint further. So when we request the information from the complainant, some of the information that we request includes a record of the advice that was rendered to the complainant, as well as records of the communication between the advisor and the complainant. And the latter is important because in some instances, there may be assurances that are given to the complainant, or there may be undertakings that are made to the client in respect to the financial service that's being rendered to them that would inform or the decision that the complainant makes to accept a particular recommendation from the FSP. So as an office, we need to be privy to that communication. So this means that the office is not only bound to, for example, the policy document or policy schedule that will then be provided to the complainant once the contract has been incepted between them and the FSP. But we also then look at before the policy schedule was issued to you, before you accepted the recommendation for a particular product, what was the discussion, or what were the discussions that took place between you and the FSP, so we can determine again whether or not the provisions of the code have been complied with. Just not to be, so now I'm just going to focus on some of the examples of the types of complaints that the office typically deals with. So this is an example of a short-term insurance product complaint. So in this instance, the complainant had cover for business vehicles. He was actually transporting certain goods cross-border. And in this particular instance, the client had requested that his cover for cross-border towing in the event of a breakdown be increased. So he spoke to the broker, and the broker said they were going to liaise with the insurer, and then they were going to come back to the client in terms of whether or not the towing cover could be increased, how much it could be increased, and the effect that it would have on the premium that the complainant was currently paying. So when the broker came back to the client, they gave them information on the premium, and they confirmed to the client that we can increase the cross-border up to a particular amount. The complainant asked for the maximum, which was 50,000 Rand. And the reason he had done that was because there had in the past been a number of breakdowns on some of his vehicles while he was transporting goods cross-border. And he'd obviously then had to absorb the cost of having the vehicles towed from one of those countries back into South Africa. So the complainant said he wants 50,000 Rand cover. The respondent agreed, the broker agreed that they were going to go back to the insurer and ask that this policy be amended in accordance with these instructions. So the complainant then received confirmation that his instructions had been actioned, and then later on, when the complainant actually had a claim because one of the vehicles had broken down while goods were being transported from Mozambique into South Africa, and the truck had broken down before it crossed the border from Mozambique, the complainant was advised that actually the cover that was increased was not for cross-border towing. It was for one of the other it was for one of the other benefits that he had as a result of that cover. So when we inquired from the respondent why the complainant had been provided with incorrect information, the position that the respondent took at that time was to refer the office to the policy schedule and to say, but if you look at the policy schedule, you can actually see that the breakdown of the benefits available to the complainant are provided in a particular manner. So it was always available to the complainant to assess what cover he actually had and did not have. The issue with that, though, is like I've mentioned, the advice that the complainant was provided with led him to believe that there was a different state of affairs to what was actually present in respect of his insurance cover when you looked at the policy schedule. So eventually, we obviously then had to say to the advisor or to the broker that you cannot deny liability for the harm that's been caused to the complainant, because even though there is the policy schedule, because the policy schedule came after you provided the advice. So what the complainant relied on was the advice that you provided, and he did not see cause to go back to the policy schedule because he didn't have a reason to doubt that the information you'd provided was correct. So based on the assurances that you provided, he then accepted the information and believed that he actually had cross-border towing, which means he was denied the opportunity to seek alternative cover that would have been able to meet his needs. So that's one of the examples. And I think this example is important because most of the complaints that the office receives related to advice and short-term insurance products, some of the brokers or most of the brokers are under the impression that because the complainant only has a specific need that they would like met, that they then the provisions of the General Code of Conduct as they relate to advice don't ordinarily apply to them, because they are under the impression that if the complainant has a need, in this example, for cross-border towing to be increased, but the product that he has does not allow for the cross-border towing to be increased, then whatever the position is, that's a position that the complainant has to accept. Except, like I've mentioned, there were other insurers on the market that possibly would have been able to provide the cover that the complainant needed. And because the FSP, the broker, had the responsibility and the legal obligation to ensure that they made a recommendation to a client that would be able to satisfy their needs and that would be based on the circumstances of that particular client, then they could not deny liability on the basis that that specific client just had a product that did not allow for the cross-border towing to be increased to the amount that he required. Okay, so I just want to emphasize that even in the event of short-term insurance products, because of the nature of the General Code of Conduct and the fact that it is what prescribes the behavior, whether or not they are, whether or not it's an established conduct within that particular FSP to conduct a needs analysis and to recommend a product based on the personal circumstances of a client does not change the fact that the provisions of the Act require that advice, that a needs analysis be conducted before advice is provided to a client, and that advice be suitable to the needs of the client, and also that the client be placed in a position to make an informed decision. Okay. So I think I'm actually just going to go straight to the conclusion. And just on the basis of the conclusion, I just want to emphasize that the General Code is prescriptive. So it not only states what must be done before financial services rendered to a client, but that the communication and the advice must be recorded. So we are concerned with the fact that the advice must be tendered to the client in a manner that is honest and in the interest of the client. So, and we also need to take into account the fact that there are high levels of illiteracy in South Africa. So it cannot suffice that in certain instances, a client would simply be provided with a policy schedule. In most instances, it would be provided in English, and that the client would be expected to understand exactly what the provisions are, and that they must prioritize that over whatever information and advice they believe to have received honestly from the financial services provider. But that FSPs need to consider what is in the best interest of the client, and that they need to render the advice with that particular understanding in mind. And while the National Treasury, along with the FSCA, which is the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, are making great strides in the goal of improving financial literacy, providers of financial services remain the experts in the products they render to consumers. And as a result, there are certain legal obligations that are tied to that. So obviously, this does not mean that complainants or clients themselves don't have certain obligations. They do. And one of those is to be honest in their dealings with an FSP and to answer questions that are asked of them in an honest manner. But that also still doesn't change the fact that the FSPs themselves are the experts in the products that they render to consumers, and that they need to render the financial service in a manner that complies with the Code of Conduct and the FAIS Act. And until such time as the provisions of Section 3 and 9 of the General Code have been changed, so for as long as they remain in force, providers must be careful to ensure that they discharge the duties found within the General Code and in the FAIS Act in a manner that complies with that, even if it means that they may not stand to gain as much of a financial interest or to be compensated as well as they would have, because the interest of the client must be accorded priority over the interest of the FSP. Okay, so that is the end of our presentation, and on the screen right now are our contact details. So thank you, everyone, and thank you to the Ombudsman for Short-Term Insurance for affording us the opportunity to be present today. So now I am going to hand over to Relebogile, who's already on the screen.
Good morning once again. To those who joined late, my name is Relebogile Mashego, an Assistant Ombudsman at the Office of the Ombudsman for Short-Term Insurance. Thank you very much, Tobile, for that presentation. We are aware that our workshop went slightly over time. We beg your indulgence for the remainder of the presentations. In my presentation, I will be telling you about what OSTI does and its complaints registration process. OSTI is an independent, non-profit ombud scheme for the short-term insurance industry. It provides the insuring public and the short-term insurance industry with a free, efficient, and fair dispute resolution mechanism through an alternative dispute resolution process applying the law and principles of fairness and equity. So for OSTI to investigate an insurance complaint or dispute, the consumer must first apply for assistance through one of our electronic portals. Consumers can apply for assistance online and find more information on our website. In addition to online submissions, consumers may submit their applications via email, telephonically, or fax. Consumers who have difficulty accessing the electronic portals to submit their complaints may visit our office to submit their documents or get assistance with submitting applications. The Complaints Registration Department captures and processes the applications through our paperless and automated administrative process. So, before OSTI sends the complaint to the insurer, the Complaints Registration Department would have ensured that the application has the correct and the complete contact details, supporting documents, the complaint details, and the relief sought by the consumer. Therefore, it is of utmost importance that consumers submit their applications with correct and comprehensive information to avoid unnecessary delays. The complaint will be sent to the insurer once the Complaint Registration Department is satisfied with the information provided. So, what can consumers do to facilitate the complaints process and better substantiate their complaints against the insurer? They must avoid waiting too long before seeking assistance. Most policies contain clauses that limit the time that a consumer has to challenge a decision on a claim. They must provide honest and detailed information when lodging a complaint. They must respond to our correspondences and request for information timeously. They must provide evidence to support their submissions or arguments. In summation, consumers remain able to approach OSTI when they need assistance with their complaints. OSTI will be able to investigate the complaint when an application has been submitted with the correct and complete details. Consumers can help facilitate our process by providing timely responses, detailed information, and evidence. I will now hand over to Assistant Ombudsman Regina Chindomu for her presentation on misrepresentation. Regina.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Relebogile. As advised, my presentation will be on misrepresentation, and the topic of my discussion is being entirely truthful and providing your insurer with all the facts. The reason I have decided to present on this topic is because our office does receive numerous complaints relating to claims that have been rejected or policies that have been cancelled as a result of policyholders failing to provide truthful information. The first aspect of my discussion will be misrepresentation or non-disclosure at sales stage. The responsibility lies with the consumer to provide the insurer with all the necessary information when one takes out a short-term insurance policy, so that the insurer can correctly underwrite the risk. In other words, so that the insurer can correctly assess and price your risk. The information provided by the consumer at sales stage is used to enable the insurer to accurately determine whether or not to cover the consumer, what premium to charge, and whether the policy should be endorsed with special conditions. The policyholder protection rules require that an insurer design its sales questions in a way that makes it easy for the insurer to obtain from consumers the correct answers which are required to underwrite the risk. The insurer is also required to explain to consumers the purpose of the questions and the fact that a claim can be rejected if the consumer is found to have provided incorrect information. If incorrect information is provided unintentionally, the insurer may still pay out a claim. However, it is not obliged to. Where policyholders intentionally provide incorrect details at sales stage, this is usually in the hope of paying a cheaper premium or obtaining some other benefit that the policyholder would otherwise not receive. The types of important information policyholders sometimes misrepresent or fail to disclose at sales stage and which leads to the rejection of a claim and or the voidance of the policy are 1, misrepresentation of the risk address, misrepresentation of security measures in place at the risk address, for example, stating that you have burglar bars on all opening windows and doors, misrepresentation of previous losses suffered, non-disclosure that cover was previously refused by an insurer, or misrepresenting or failing to disclose previous criminal charges or previous conviction. And one of the most common, misrepresenting the regular driver details. When placing a vehicle on cover, insurers will explain to consumers the importance of providing the correct regular driver details, as this information determines the premium that will be levied for your vehicle insurance. In determining the premium, the insurer will consider factors such as the age of the regular driver, how long the regular driver has had a license, and the number of accidents that the driver has had in the previous 3 to 5 years. This information speaks to the experience of the driver. For example, a 45-year-old person who has been licensed for over 20 years will be viewed as a lower risk in comparison to a 20-year-old driver who has been licensed for less than 3 years. This explains why most consumers will note a parent as the regular driver, as opposed to correctly noting themselves in order to enjoy the benefit of paying a lower premium. If you misrepresent or fail to disclose material facts to the insurer, your policy may be voided with effect from the start date. In this event, you will be entitled to receive a refund of all premiums paid since the start date. But this is hardly a comfort when you're faced with a big claim, such as a case where your vehicle is written off, is stolen, or where your home is burgled. The second aspect I'll discuss is misrepresentation, dishonesty, or fraud at claim stage. As a consumer, you are required, as a policyholder rather, you are required to be entirely truthful when you lodge a claim with your insurer. This enables the insurer to establish the validity of your claim and if that claim will be covered in terms of the policy. Most insurance policies contain a clause entitling the insurer to reject the entire claim, even if just one aspect of it is found to be dishonest. Insurers conduct detailed investigations of a claim, and at this stage, any misrepresentation, dishonesty, or fraud would invariably be revealed. For instance, on a vehicle claim, the insurer may perform an assessment interview with witnesses, including the third party, towing operators, or the police. The insurer may also request medical reports, bank statements, vehicle tracking reports, and cell phone beacons and billings to ascertain whether the policyholder or the incident driver complied with the terms and conditions of the insurance contract. As some of the claims based on misrepresentation, dishonesty, and fraud can be of a very high value, it is important for consumers to be aware that payment of these undue benefits and fraudulent claims will over time affect other honest policyholders in the form of increased premiums. It is therefore in the interest of all stakeholders to have insurers authenticate high value or suspicious claims, understanding that this is not just a fact-finding mission by insurers with the intention of rejecting valid claims. The types of important information that policyholders usually misrepresent or are dishonest about at claim stage relating to vehicle claims includes information relating to the incident driver's previous whereabouts, alcohol consumption, or the manner in which the accident damage occurred. In the case of household contents, policyholders usually make the mistake of taking a legitimate burglary as an opportunity to claim for items, clothes, or devices which they never owned, or which were stolen in previous incidents. Some policyholders go as far as providing fraudulent documentation in support of such claims. Needless to say, the insurer's investigators often unearth the truth behind these misrepresentations and fraud, resulting in the rejection of the entire claim. The consequences of having an insurer reject a claim on grounds of misrepresentation, dishonesty, or fraud are quite serious, as more often than not, it will result in the immediate cancellation of the policy. Upon establishing that a policyholder has submitted fraudulent information or fraudulent documents in an attempt to gain an undue benefit, an insurer may also report such person or persons to the South African Police Service or to the South African Insurance Crime Bureau, both of which could result in the prosecution of the perpetrators. It is also important to note that even when one is not reported to the police or to the South African Insurance Crime Bureau, one cannot outrun the negative impact of a policy that is cancelled on the above-mentioned grounds. There will always be a duty on a consumer to disclose to every future prospective insurer that a policy was previously cancelled by another insurer on these grounds, be it 2 or 10 years after such cancellation, and it will prove difficult for that person to find alternative cover in future. While the underwriting criteria of most insurers does not extend cover to consumers whose policies have previously been cancelled on grounds of misrepresentation, dishonesty, or fraud, the insurers that do accept such risks will do so for a much higher premium, which the everyday consumer may not be able to afford. The next aspect I will discuss is the continued duty to provide true and complete information to the insurer throughout the life of the policy. A policyholder's duty to disclose does not end once the cover starts. You are required to inform your insurer of any material change in your circumstance as they relate to the insurance contract throughout the life of the policy. In the case of vehicle insurance, such material changes may include a change in address, a change in the vehicle usage, a change in the regular driver details. In the case of household contents, material changes may include a significant increase in the value of your household contents, or a change in the use of the property, or changes in the security on the premises, such as the deactivation of the linked 24-hour alarm system, or the permanent or temporary removal of security gates or burglar bars. It may happen that the change in your circumstance does not align with the underwriting criteria of the insurer, and had the insurer been informed of such changes, the policy would have been cancelled or had conditions and endorsements added to it. In this regard, when the insurer does become aware of the material changes that were not disclosed to it, the insurer may be entitled to cancel the policy as from the date of the changes. In conclusion, it is imperative that you always provide true and complete information in all your interactions with the insurer. Hopefully, this presentation has illuminated to consumers the absolute importance of always providing the insurer with true and complete information, even if such information will result in unfavorable terms and conditions or result in a claim being unsuccessful. That brings me to the end of my presentation, ladies and gentlemen, and I will now hand you over back to our facilitator, Rilebohile Mashego. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Regina. That was the Assistant Ombudsman from OSTI. Now, I would like to thank all our speakers for such valuable information. I see that we do not have any questions, so I will now hand over to Ayanda Mazwi, Senior Assistant Ombudsman and Head of Public Relations, for her vote of thanks. Ayanda.
Thank you very much, Relebohile, for a good facilitation of the workshop. From my side, I'd also like to extend a very heartfelt thank you to all of the presenters and the ombuds officers rather that are here today. I think we were provided with insightful information and shared very practical advice for consumers across the different areas in which we operate. I am very grateful for that. For your information, we have been live tweeting some of the key points in the presentations that we had here today, including the trends and consumer tips that you provided. This was done during the course of our workshop, and I'd like to thank Sarufa Investments, our PR consultant, for doing this. This workshop has also been recorded, and it will be available on the websites of all of the Ombuds offices that presented here today. We will also provide a link to the video recording on our social media platforms, and you are welcome to share it with your colleagues, your family, your friends, and your neighbors. Last but not least, I would like to say thank you to everybody that attended the workshop. Thank you for indulging us with the extension of time, but it was critical that we share the information that we shared with you today. We hope that it was valuable and that you would be able now to proceed and know which office to submit your complaint in the different areas that we dealt with today. Should you have any further questions, please contact Adila, who sent out the invitations. Otherwise, I wish everybody a very good day and a very good rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.